The chamber is open, and the stones are full of whispers, not the kind you hear with ears. The kind you feel in your ribs when a single choice stands in front of a person like a doorway, and the world decides, quietly, without ceremony, what kind of story it will become. Because there's a version of Harry Potter's life you already know. A life built out of locked cupboards, thin smiles, hunger that wasn't only for food, and a childhood shaped by absence. But this is not that version. This is the story of the night everything changed, and the second choice made on the same night that mattered just as much as the first. November 1st, 1981. Godric's Hollow was still burning when Sirius Black arrived. The cottage was no longer a home. It was a broken shell with smoke curling from its bones, and the air tasted like scorched wood and spell residue and something worse, something final. Sirius ran through the wreckage like a man chasing an echo. His cloak snagged on splintered beams, his boots skidded on scattered rubble. Somewhere in his mind, a rational part tried to count details like an auror would later. The angle of the blast, the direction of the collapse, the pattern of the curse scars along the doorway. But rationality was far away. All he had was the violent certainty that James and Lily had been here 5 minutes ago, and if he ran fast enough, he could still reach them in time. He found James first. James lay in the entrance hall as if he'd fallen mid-step, one hand stretched towards the space where an enemy had stood. His wand was still clutched in his fingers, stubborn to the end. His eyes were open, glassy, fixed on nothing. Sirius stopped so abruptly, his breath punched out of him. For a moment the world didn't make sense. It tried to rearrange itself into something survivable. Sirius waited for James to twitch, to inhale, to swear, to grin up at him and call him dramatic for bursting in like a storm. Nothing happened. Sirius dropped to his knees beside him, hands hovering, not daring to touch. Like touch would make it real. His throat made a sound that wasn't words, not even a sob, just an animal noise pulled out of a man who'd reached the edge of what he could hold. No, Sirius rasped. No, no, no. Prongs. He didn't finish. There was a thin, panicked cry, like a kitten trapped behind walls. Sirius lurched to his feet, nearly slipping on debris as he staggered towards the staircase. The steps were cracked. The banister was half gone. He took them 2 at a time anyway, heart hammering hard enough to bruise him from the inside. The nursery door had been blasted off its hinges. Lily was there. She was draped across the crib, like she'd tried to become a shield, and succeeded only in dying as one. Red hair spread across broken boards like spilled ink. One arm was still outstretched as if she'd been reaching, always reaching, for the thing she loved. And inside the crib, baby Harry screamed, "Alive, alive, alive, alive." Sirius made a sound again, this time half laughter, half grief so sharp it felt like he'd swallowed glass. He reached into the crib with hands that shook uncontrollably and gathered Harry up against his chest. The baby's little fists clutched at his shirt. His face was blotchy and wet with tears. On his forehead was a fresh, angry lightning bolt scar, still bleeding in a thin line. Sirius pressed his face into Harry's hair. It smelled like milk and smoke. He could barely breathe. He stayed like that, godfather and godson, ruins and silence, until footsteps shook the broken ground outside. A giant shadow filled what was left of the doorway. Hagrid. Hagrid's face was streaked with soot, his beard singed in places. His eyes were wet and enormous, in a way Sirius had never seen, like someone had reached into him and wrung out every ounce of gentleness. "Sirius," Hagrid said, voice rough with pain. "Oh, Sirius." Sirius didn't answer. He couldn't. He held Harry tighter, as if the baby might evaporate if he loosened his grip. Hagrid stepped forward carefully, as though he was approaching a wild creature. "Dumbledore sent me," Hagrid said softly. I'm to take Harry, take him to his aunt and uncle. Something in Sirius snapped cleanly. No, it wasn't shouted. It was worse. It was a low, flat refusal from a place deep in him that had nothing left to bargain with. He's mine, Sirius said. James, Lily, they chose me. I'm his godfather. Hagrid's hands curled and uncurled. Helpless. I know, Sirius. I know. But Dumbledore says it's for his protection. Protection? Sirius almost laughed. Protection had been wards and secrets, and the Fidelius charm, and James trusting the wrong friend. Protection had been everything they'd sacrificed for, and it had still ended like this. James dead downstairs, Lily dead upstairs, the house shattered by a curse that should have killed the baby too. Sirius looked down at Harry, at the scar, at the furious little life clinging stubbornly to the world. He wanted to run. He wanted to take Harry and disappear beyond the reach of the Ministry. Beyond Dumbledore. Beyond everyone who might try to decide what happened to James Potter's son. And in that same moment, because grief makes people think in jagged flashes, another thought cut through him like a knife. Peter. Peter was secret keeper. Peter had been there in every meeting, every whispered plan, every laugh forced too loud to hide fear. Peter had insisted, with trembling earnestness, that Sirius was the obvious choice, that Sirius was too visible, too predictable, too easy a target. They had switched. At the last minute, James had clapped Sirius on the shoulder and said, "Trust me, Padfoot. It'll be fine. Peter's safe. No one suspects him." Peter. Sirius's vision went hot. His stomach turned. If Peter had betrayed them, if Peter had sold them to Voldemort, then Peter would already be planning the next part. Because Peter Pettigrew didn't do anything without a plan to survive it. Sirius's mind raced. If he vanished with Harry, Peter would have time to move, to frame him, to bury the truth under panic and politics, to make Sirius the villain and himself the martyr. Sirius swallowed hard. His hands were trembling so badly, Harry's crying stuttered into little hiccuping sobs. Hagrid looked at him, waiting. Sirius stared past him into the smoke-filled night and made the second choice. Not the choice of a man who had nothing left, the choice of a man who still had one thing that mattered. Truth. He forced his voice steady. "Take my bike," Sirius heard himself say. Words numb and hollow. "You'll need it to get him there quick." Hagrid blinked. "Your bike?" Sirius nodded once. He couldn't let himself think. Thinking would stop him. Thinking would make him grab Harry and flee. Instead, he leaned forward and pressed a quick shaking kiss to Harry's forehead, just above the scar. "I'll find you," he whispered. "I swear it. I'll find you." Harry didn't understand the words, but he quieted a little, as if the vow itself had weight. Sirius handed him over. His arms felt empty immediately, like someone had reached inside his chest and scooped out something vital. Hagrid took Harry gently, cradling him against the thick bulk of his coat. He looked at Sirius with raw sympathy and something like admiration, as though he knew this wasn't surrender. It was strategy. "I'll keep him safe," Hagrid promised. "I swear it." Sirius gave a short, tight nod. Hagrid mounted the motorbike with careful awkwardness, then kicked off into the night sky, rising above the ruined cottage, like a dark bird carrying the last living piece of a broken family. Sirius watched until the bike was a speck. Then he apparated. Not to the Ministry, not to the leaky cauldron, not to hunt alone like a man on fire, as he would have done in another version of this story. He went north, Leeds, to a shabby flat with peeling paint and a faint smell of damp and tea and old books. Remus Lupin opened the door looking like death. The full moon had been 2 nights ago. Remus's face was grey with exhaustion. hair damp with sweat, eyes shadowed as if sleep had become something he no longer trusted. There were bandages around one hand, and a bruise blooming near his jaw. He took one look at Sirius, and his expression went carefully blank, like a mask sliding into place. Sirius stood in the doorway, chest heaving as if he'd run the whole way. "They're dead," Sirius said. The words cracked in the middle. He hated himself for that. Hated the weakness of his own voice. Hated the way grief made him sound small. Remus didn't flinch, but something in his eyes changed. Something shuttered. "I felt it," Remus said quietly. "The wards. It was like a candle going out." Sirius nodded, throat too tight to speak. His fingers dug into his palms hard enough to hurt. Remus's gaze sharpened, suspicious despite the horror. "What are you doing here, Sirius? Where's Harry?" Sirius swallowed. He could feel the moment balancing on a knife edge. If Remus didn't believe him, if Remus chose suspicion over hope, then Sirius would be alone, and Peter would win. "He's alive," Sirius said. "Hagrid took him." "Dumbledore's orders?" "Dumbledore's orders," Sirius confirmed, then forced the next words out before fear could choke them. "Remus, I swear on James's grave, it wasn't me." Remus's face went still. Sirius stepped forward, hands spread slightly, as if he were trying to show he carried no weapon except the truth. "We switched," Sirius said. "At the last minute, James thought I was too obvious. We made Peter secret keeper instead." Remus didn't move. His breathing was steady, but Sirius could see the wall behind his eyes. Years of paranoia, months of losses, the constant dread that any friend could be an enemy wearing a familiar face. And Peter, Sirius's voice shook. Peter betrayed them. He sold them to Voldemort. Silence. The room seemed to hold its breath. Remus stared at Sirius so hard it felt like being dissected. He looked at Sirius's face, his hands, his eyes, as if searching for the telltale signs of deception. Then Remus whispered, "Peter." Sirius nodded once, sharp. "I know where he is, or where he was. He'll run. He'll try to disappear, but not before he makes sure someone else takes the fall." Remus's jaw tightened. "You're saying he's going to frame you?" "He already has," Sirius said bitterly. "It's what he does. He survives, he wriggles, he makes everyone else bleed." Remus's eyes flicked down and back up. "Why should I believe you?" The question landed like a punch. Sirius didn't bristle. He didn't snap. He didn't do what he always did and turn pain into anger. Because he couldn't afford pride. Because James was dead, and Lizzie was dead, and Harry was alive somewhere in the sky, and the only way Sirius could keep him safe was to make the world see the truth before it could be buried. Sirius's voice went low. "Because you know me." Remus's expression didn't soften. Sirius stepped closer anyway, daring Remus to see past fear. "I've done a lot of stupid things," Sirius said. "I've been reckless. I've been cruel when I shouldn't have been. But I would never, never," his voice broke. He inhaled hard, forcing it back together. "I loved them," Sirius said. "They were my family. James was my brother. Lily was Lily." Remus's eyes flickered. Sirius leaned forward, intensity burning through grief like molten iron. "And because, if I wanted to vanish, I could have vanished," Sirius said. "I could have taken Harry. I could have fled. But I didn't. I made a choice. I'm here because I'm not letting Peter get away with it." The silence stretched long enough to hurt. Then Remus exhaled, slow and controlled, like a man stepping off a ledge and trusting the fall won't kill him. He reached behind the door, grabbed his coat, grabbed his wand. "Where is he?" Remus asked. Sirius's shoulders sagged with relief so intense it almost made him dizzy. "London," Sirius said. A street he'll choose because it has witnesses. Remus's mouth tightened in grim understanding. Of course he will. They moved like they'd never stopped being what the war had forced them to become. A pair of marauders built out of loyalty and stubbornness. Scarred young men who'd learned too early that survival wasn't noble, it was strategy. They didn't track Peter through brilliance. They tracked him through knowing him. Peter Pettigrew, given the chance, would always pick a crowd, always pick a place where panic could be weaponized, always pick a moment dramatic enough to be remembered wrong. They found him near a busy street, shops still open, muggles drifting past with bags and scarves, ordinary life brushing up against a world it didn't know existed. Peter emerged from an alley, looking frantic and purposeful, his eyes darting. And the moment he saw Sirius and Remus, his face changed, not into fear, into performance. Sirius Black, Peter screamed, voice cracking theatrically. He pointed with shaking fingers, loud enough to make heads turn. How could you? How could you betray James and Lily? Muggles stopped, stared, whispered. A few laughed nervously, assuming it was some strange fight, some private madness spilling into public. Peter's wand was already moving, fingers tightening around it as he lifted it with the quickness of someone who'd rehearsed the motion. Sirius felt something cold settle over his anger. You planned this. He didn't give Peter time. Remus didn't either. Their voices cut through the street at the same time. Two spells that didn't look impressive to an untrained eye, but were precise in a way only desperate men could manage. Revelio Animagus. The magic hit Peter mid-motion like a hook. Blue-white light snapped around him. His body convulsed. For a split second, fur rippled across his skin, then vanished. His form flickered between rat and man, like a candle sputtering in wind. Then Peter Pettigrew stood fully human in the open street, wand raised, curse half-formed on his lips. Witnesses, dozens of them, and 3 auras at the far end of the road, drawn by the sudden spike of magic like sharks smelling blood. One of them, a witch with a hard face and practical hair, lifted her wand instantly. Pettigrew, she said, disbelief sharp in her voice. You're supposed to be dead. Remus didn't hesitate. A swift motion. A wordless curse. Peter's limbs snapped rigid. He hit the ground like a dropped puppet. Eyes still frantic. Mouth working soundlessly. Sirius stepped forward, wand trained on Peter's heart. His voice was ice. Check his wand. The aura witch stared at Sirius like she wanted to arrest him on principle. Then she moved, cautious, wand flicking in a tight, practiced arc. Priori incantatum. Ghostly magic erupted from Peter's wand. A blasting curse, half-formed and vicious. And then something worse. A twisting, skeletal mark of greenish-black magic that hovered in the air like a threat given shape. The dark mark. Muggles couldn't see it properly. Their eyes slid away, confused, uneasy, minds refusing to process what didn't fit. But the auras saw. The street went silent in the way silence happens when reality reorders itself. The witch's face paled. He conjured the mark, she breathed. When? Remus's voice was quiet, merciless, probably never in public. But he's been branded. Voldemort marked his servants. The Aurore's eyes hardened. 2 more Aurors advanced. One's up. A quick exchange of clipped words, a silent understanding that this wasn't a bar fight. This was the end of a lie the entire wizarding world had swallowed. They arrested Peter Pettigrew on the spot. And for the first time since James and Lily died, Sirius felt the direction of the world shift. Not because it was getting better, but because it was becoming honest. The ministry moved fast when it wanted to. Barty Crouch Sr. himself led the interrogation, grim-faced and furious at the idea that the ministry had been fooled so completely. Veritaserum glimmered like liquid truth. Peter lasted 3 hours. 3 hours of trembling denials, of slippery half-answers, of trying to wriggle out of responsibility with the same pathetic desperation he'd always had. Then he broke. The words poured out in a rush. Secret keeper switch, betrayal, Voldemort's location, the plan to frame Sirius, the intended explosion, the staged finger. The finger, notably, still attached to his hand. By dawn, the wizarding world was reeling. By noon, Peter Pettigrew was in a cell in Azkaban, and Sirius Black, who had been a heartbeat away from becoming the most hated man in Britain, stood in the ministry's cold corridors as a free man. Free, but not whole, because freedom didn't bring James back. It didn't bring Lily back. It didn't erase the image of their bodies from his mind. And it didn't answer the question that mattered most. Where was Harry? Sirius went to Hogwarts the next day. Dumbledore sat behind his desk, looking older than Sirius had ever seen him. Fawkes perched nearby, quiet, feathers sleek but eyes bright with a sadness that felt ancient. Sirius didn't bother with pleasantries. "I want Harry," Sirius said. Dumbledore's gaze sharpened, though his voice stayed gentle. "I thought you might." "He's my godson," Sirius said. "James and Lily chose me." That wasn't symbolic. That was a responsibility. Dumbledore folded his hands. "It is, and you are right to claim it." Sirius blinked. The ease of that agreement threw him off balance for half a second. Then Dumbledore continued. "However, there are protections to consider." Sirius's mouth tightened. "Here it comes." Dumbledore didn't flinch at the bitterness. When Lily died to save Harry, Dumbledore said she invoked a magic older than wandwork, a protection born from sacrifice. I have anchored that protection to her blood, specifically to Petunia Dursley. As long as Harry lives with his mother's blood relatives, a certain boundary remains. Sirius felt his anger flare bright and hot. "Voldemort is gone," Sirius snapped. "His body's destroyed. His followers are scattered. You're telling me the only safe place for Harry is with a woman Lily barely spoke to, and a man who hates magic?" Dumbledore's eyes were steady. "Voldemort is not merely a man who can be killed once." Sirius leaned forward, hands braced on the desk. "And you're basing Harry's entire childhood on a theory." "I am basing it on what I know of Tom Riddle," Dumbledore said quietly, "and on what I know of magic." Sirius's laugh was sharp. "I know magic, too. I know the Fidelius charm. I know wards. I know how to protect a child without locking him in a house that will treat him like a problem to be endured." Dumbledore studied him for a long moment. Sirius forced himself to breathe. He thought of Hagrid's bike vanishing into the night. He thought of Harry's tiny hands clinging. He thought of Remus standing beside him on that London street, choosing him. "We can replace your blood wards," Sirius said. Voice firm now, controlled. "We can do it properly. Fidelius charm, strong wards, real protections. I'll make Remus secret keeper. Or you can be. But Harry is not going to that house." Dumbledore's gaze flicked, subtle as a knife. "You would tie Harry's safety to the loyalty of a single person again, after what happened." Sirius didn't look away. "Yes, because the alternative was worse. Because trust could be betrayed, but a loveless home could rot a child from the inside." Sirius spoke slowly, forcing every word to carry weight. "You know what the ministry looks like right now. Chaos, panic, relief, and then the slow, ugly reality of what they almost did, of what they would have done, by throwing me in Azkaban without trial." His voice darkened. "Do you really think they can deny custody now?" Sirius asked. Do you really think they can look the public in the face, after discovering they nearly imprisoned an innocent man for life, and say, "No, actually, we're taking the orphan and handing him to Muggles"? Not disagreement, calculation. Sirius pressed his advantage. "Harry is my responsibility," Sirius said, softer now but no less certain. "Mine, and James's, and Lily's, not yours." "I'm not asking permission, Albus. I'm telling you what will happen. You can work with me, or you can fight me." The office went still. Fawkes let out a low, mournful note. Dumbledore looked at Sirius for a long time. Then he sighed. An old man's sigh, heavy with too many choices and too many graves. "Very well," Dumbledore said. "Legal guardianship can be arranged, but there will be conditions." Sirius's jaw tightened. "Name them." "The Fidelius charm is non-negotiable," Dumbledore said, "and I will maintain oversight." Sirius's eyes narrowed. "Oversight, not control," Dumbledore corrected gently. "Oversight? Harry's life will touch forces you cannot yet see." Sirius stared at him, then nodded once. "Fine," Sirius said. "Fidelius. Oversight. Whatever you want to call it, as long as Harry comes home." Dumbledore dipped his head. "Then we are agreed." Sirius walked out of Hogwarts that day with a parchment in his pocket and something unfamiliar in his chest. It wasn't peace, it wasn't healing, but it was purpose, carved into him like a promise. 3 days later, Remus Lupin moved into 12 Grimmauld Place. It was a house that didn't want to be a home. Its walls were thick with old magic and older hatred. The air smelled like cold stone and dust, and the sourness of long-neglected rooms. Portraits muttered in the dark. Floors creaked like warnings. The first thing that greeted them when they stepped inside was Walburga Black's portrait, shrieking like a siren. "Blood traitor! Filth! Disgrace to the noble house of Black!" Sirius stood in the entrance hall, holding a sleeping baby, looking up at the face of his mother, screaming abuse from a gilded frame. His expression was blank. Remus, standing behind him with one battered suitcase and tired eyes, watched carefully, as if waiting for Sirius to shatter. Sirius didn't shatter. He reached for his wand. "Right," Sirius said, voice calm in a way that made Remus uneasy. "Let's start." Walburga screamed louder as Sirius began lifting bricks from the corner of the hall with swift, practiced magic. Remus blinked. "Sirius, what are you doing?" Sirius didn't look away from the portrait. "Building a wall." "You can't silence me," Walburga shrieked. "This is my house." Sirius's mouth twitched. "Was." Remus stepped forward, lifted his own wand, and began weaving silencing charms into the rising brickwork as if this was the most natural teamwork in the world. Brick by brick, charm by charm, they entombed the portrait. Walburga's voice dulled into muffled rage, then into nothing. By dawn, there was a neat section of wall where hatred used to hang, and in front of it, Sirius placed a simple framed photograph of his motorbike. Laughing, young, wind in his hair. Sirius stepped back, wiped dust off his hands. "One down," he said. Remus's eyes drifted to the shadowed corridors, the doxies in the curtains, the cursed objects that hummed faintly with malice, the heavy air of a family legacy that had been poison long before Voldemort ever rose. "Several thousand to go," Remus replied. Harry slept in Sirius's arms, warm and small and alive. And for the first time since Godric's Hollow, Sirius felt the future open. Not safe, not easy, but possible. They worked for months. They scrubbed the house until the stones stopped feeling like it was holding its breath. They lifted the worst artifacts with careful gloves and wards, and Remus's methodical research. Sirius, who knew dark magic the way some people knew weather, sorted the dangerous from the lethal, the cursed from the merely unpleasant. They curated the library rather than destroying it, because knowledge was not the enemy, even when it came wrapped in ugly histories. The most dangerous books were locked away behind layered wards. The rest remained rare texts and old magic that could become a weapon if used wrong, or a shield if used right. Creature was a problem. Old, bitter, loyal to Wahlberger's screaming ideology like a religion. He fought every change. When Sirius threw out a cursed music box that tried to whisper to Harry's dreams, Creature wailed like a grieving ghost. Master is ruining the noble house. Master is breaking everything. Sirius's temper flared. Then he did something Remus didn't expect. He crouched. He brought himself down to the elf's height. His voice was hard, but not cruel. This house was already broken, Sirius said. I'm rebuilding it, and you're going to help. Creature's eyes bulged, watery and furious. Sirius continued, slower now. I'm not going to treat you the way she did. I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to mock you. Do your job, and you'll be treated with respect. Understood? Creature trembled. For a long moment it looked like he might spit in Sirius's face. Then, grudgingly, he nodded. It wasn't love, not yet. But it was the beginning of something else, a crack in a lifetime of obedience to hate. By the time Harry turned 1, Grimmauld Place had changed. It was still dark-boned. The black aesthetic clung stubbornly to its architecture, like a house refusing to forget what it had been built for. But now it was clean, warm. There were toys in the parlor, a high chair at the table, a soft blanket on the couch where Remus read by lamplight, while Sirius paced with Harry on his shoulder, bouncing him gently, whispering nonsense in a voice no one outside these walls would ever believe he possessed. Sometimes, late at night, Sirius would collapse into bed and stare at the ceiling and think, James, I'm doing it. I'm keeping him safe. And in the room down the hall, Remus would sit with a book open on his knees, not reading, just listening to the small sounds of life in a house that used to be a tomb, and think, I have a purpose again. Neither of them said it aloud. They didn't need to, because the house itself was beginning to learn a new language. Not blood, not purity, not legacy, but laughter, and tiny footsteps, and the quiet, relentless rebuilding of a family that had no business existing, except that 2 broken men refused to let the world decide what would become of one living child. And that was only the beginning. 1985 arrived softly, like a breath held for too long, and finally released. Harry Potter was 5 years old, and if you watched him for more than 10 seconds, you understood immediately what James and Lily had created. James's wild, stubborn fearlessness lived in his posture. Lily's sharp intelligence lived behind his eyes. And something else, something born out of being raised instead of abandoned, sat in him like a quiet certainty. He belonged. He belonged in this house, in these arms, in this strange patched-together life, where love was not a rare event. It was the atmosphere. On a Sunday morning, Harry looped a toy broom around the drawing room, as if the air itself owed him obedience. He leaned into turns too sharply, hair sticking up in every direction, laughing like there had never been a war in the world. Sirius sat sprawled on the rug, cheering like Harry was winning the World Cup. That's it. Yes. Cut left. Show it who's boss. Remus, in an armchair with a book on his lap, watched with the expression of a man doing mental math. Physics still applies, Remus said, voice dry. Even to you. Harry angled the broom in a dramatic swoop, missed the curve, and clipped a curtain rod. The broom wobbled. Harry yelped, flailed, and then the cushion from the sofa whipped off its place and shot under him, catching him before he could fall. He landed with a bounce, blinking in surprise. Sirius's grin was instant. "Accidental magic," he said proudly. Like Harry had just performed a professional stunt, Remus closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "He's 5. Harry climbed off the floating cushion, pleased. "I didn't even think," he said. "It just happened." "That's how it starts," Remus said gently, softer now. "Magic listens when you're too young to know you're speaking." Harry looked at the cushion thoughtfully, then at his hands. "Can I do it again?" Sirius leaned forward. "Try." Remus gave Sirius a look that said, "You are a menace." Harry frowned hard at the cushion, concentrated with his whole little face. Nothing happened. Harry's eyebrows knitted deeper. Still nothing. Sirius opened his mouth to encourage. The cushion exploded into feathers. A blizzard of them. They drifted down like snow, coating the carpet, sticking to Sirius's hair, settling into Remus's tea. There was a beat of silence. Then Sirius laughed so hard he fell backward. Remus stared at the feathers in his cup, sighed, and said, "Perfect." Harry stared too, then started laughing as well, delighted by the chaos of it. Sirius ruffled his hair, feathers and all. "You're going to be insufferable at Hogwarts." "I'm going to be brilliant," Harry declared. Remus's mouth twitched. "Those are not mutually exclusive." Sirius's laughter faded, replaced by a softer smile. He watched Harry run through the feather drifts like it was the most natural thing in the world, running free, unafraid, loved. Sirius thought about Godric's Hollow, the way you think about a scar you can't stop touching. Some nights he still woke up with smoke in his throat and Lily's blood in his mind. Some nights he still heard James's laugh cut short. But then Harry would pad into his room in the early morning with messy hair and warm hands, climbing into bed like he had always belonged there. Sirius would hold him and think, "I'm doing it. I'm keeping my promise." And Remus would watch from the doorway sometimes, eyes softened by something he refused to name, and think, this is what they died for. Not revenge, not glory. That summer, Sirius made a decision. Not about war, not about dark lords, about parks. "Lily would haunt me if I raised him without letting him know the Muggle world," Sirius said one afternoon, leaning against the kitchen counter while Remus read the prophet with the air of a man trying not to throw it into the fire. Remus looked up. "That assumes Lily would haunt you instead of laugh at you." "She'd do both," Sirius said with complete confidence. "But still, we can't make Harry into a person who only understands half his inheritance." Remus considered. "You mean Lily's." "I mean Lily's and James's," Sirius corrected. "James didn't understand Muggles. Lily did. If we're going to honor both of them, we do it properly." Remus's eyes narrowed. "Define properly." Sirius smiled with the innocence of a man who had never once defined properly the way other people did. "London," Sirius said. Remus stared. "Absolutely not," Remus said immediately. Sirius tilted his head. "Yes." "Do you remember," Remus said slowly, "that you have a face that makes people either stare or start trouble?" Sirius's smile widened. "That's part of the cultural experience." Remus shut his eyes briefly. "And do you remember that you're wanted?" "Not wanted," Sirius cut in smoothly. "Respected." Remus made a noise that might have been a laugh. "Sirius." Sirius softened. "Just a day. We'll dress like Muggles. We'll keep our heads down. We'll let Harry see a world that doesn't involve portraits screaming at him." Remus glanced toward the drawing room, where Harry was now trying to stack books into a castle and talking to himself as if he was leading an army. Remus sighed. The sigh of a man who had learned that resistance was often temporary. Fine, Remus said. But if you start anything— I never start anything, Sirius said, indignant. Things start themselves around me. Remus's stare was long and unimpressed. Sirius grinned. Okay, I usually start things, so they went. Sirius in jeans and a leather jacket, looking like exactly the kind of reckless aristocrat he was, only now disguised as a Muggle troublemaker, instead of a wizarding one. Remus in a cardigan and simple trousers, looking like a tired university lecturer who had been dragged out of the library against his will. Harry between them, holding Sirius's hand with one small fist and Remus's sleeve with the other, like a child anchoring himself between two planets. They walked through Muggle London, under a bright sky that felt almost illegal after so many years of war and fear. Harry stared at buses like they were magical beasts. He watched pigeons with fascination. He gasped when a dog barked at him. He asked questions every 30 seconds, until even Sirius, who admired relentless curiosity as a personality trait, started bargaining with him. If you give me 3 minutes of silence, Sirius said, I'll buy you. An ice cream? Harry guessed. Remus sighed. You're negotiating with him. This is how dictators are born. Sirius leaned down. Yes, an ice cream. But only if you stop asking why the red boxes are red. Harry considered this. Serious, like it was the most important decision of his life. Then he said, Why are they red, though? Sirius groaned. Remus laughed quietly, as if surprised by the sound. They reached a park, just as the afternoon softened. Leaves rustled overhead. Children ran in clusters. Parents stood in loose circles. The air smelled like grass and sunlight, and the faint sweetness of ice cream carts. Harry sprinted toward the swings, only to be caught by Sirius's hand like a leash. Rule 1, Sirius said. Never outrun the adults. It panics them. Harry huffed. You outrun adults all the time. Yes, Sirius said proudly, but I have experience. Remus nudged Sirius with his elbow. Don't teach him that. Sirius winked at Harry. Teach him everything. Harry grinned and took off again, slower this time. They sat on a bench, watching him. Remus's shoulders loosened fraction by fraction, as if the very act of existing in a normal place was teaching his body that it could unclench. Sirius leaned back, face tipped toward the sun, pretending he wasn't scanning constantly for threats out of habit. For a moment, it almost felt like peace. Then it happened. Not with a scream, not with a dramatic explosion. With a book, a group of Muggle children were playing near a path. Their voices were bright, shrill, normal, until one of them turned sharp with cruelty. Know it all, a boy sneered. Sirius's eyes flicked over automatically. A girl stood slightly apart from the others, clutching a book to her chest like it was armor. She was about 6, maybe 7, with bushy brown hair that looked like it fought gravity out of principle, and large front teeth that gave her face an earnest intensity. The other kids circled like sharks, always reading. A girl mocked. Do you even have friends? The girl's face flushed red. She gripped her book harder. Leave me alone, she said, voice trembling with fury and humiliation. The boy laughed. Why? What are you going to do? Read at us? The girl's eyes shone, not with tears, but with something hotter. And then the book began to glow. Remus sat up straight so fast the bench creaked. Sirius's head snapped toward it, adrenaline instantly awake. The girl's book vibrated in her hands. Then another book, left abandoned on the grass, lifted into the air. Then another, then a fourth. They rose like planets around a sun, orbiting her head in a slow, controlled spiral. The air around her shimmered. The ground beneath her feet cracked with thin fissures, spreading outward like a spiderweb. The children stopped laughing. Their faces changed as their brains collided with something they couldn't explain. One screamed. Then the group broke, running. The girl, Hermione, stood alone, shaking. The books still circling, the cracks still creeping outward. She looked like she was trying to breathe through panic and failing. Remus was already moving. He approached slowly, hands visible, posture calm, in the way you become calm when you're trying not to spook a wild animal. Sirius stood too, stepping after him. Harry, sensing the shift, ran back to them, eyes wide. "What's happening?" "Stay behind us," Remus said without looking away. Sirius's voice was gentle but firm. "Listen to Remus." The girl's eyes darted to them, terrified. She gasped. "I can't." "Stop it." Remus stopped a few steps away, lowering himself slightly so he didn't loom. "Hey," Remus said, voice soft. "It's all right. You're not doing anything wrong." "Yes, I am," the girl burst out. "They said I'm weird, and now it's this." The cracks widened. Sirius's jaw tightened. He'd seen accidental magic turn violent. He'd seen fear become fire. Remus spoke like a man talking someone down from the edge of a cliff. "It responds to your emotions," Remus said. "Magic does, especially when you're young." The girl stared at him like he was speaking a foreign language. Remus nodded encouragingly. "Take a breath. One slow breath. Think about something calm, something safe." "I don't have," the girl choked. "I don't have." Sirius stepped forward just enough to be seen without crowding. His voice changed, less sharp, less sarcastic, more sincere than he usually allowed himself. "Look at me," Sirius said. The girl's eyes flicked to him despite herself. Sirius smiled, small and warm. "You're doing something incredible," he said, "but you're scaring yourself. And if you scare yourself more, the magic gets louder." The girl's lower lip trembled. Remus held out his hand slightly, palm open. "One breath," he repeated. "Just one." The girl inhaled, shaky, uneven. The orbiting book slowed. She exhaled. The cracks in the earth stopped creeping. The books drifted downward like tired birds and thumped softly into the grass. The girl sagged, as if her bones had turned to water. Remus's voice remained steady. "There you go. That's it." Sirius let out a slow breath, tension easing. Harry peeked from behind Sirius's hip, staring at the girl like she was a dragon. The girl stared back. "What?" she whispered. "What was that?" Remus's expression softened in a way that made him look younger for a second. "It was magic," Remus said. The girl blinked rapidly. "Magic isn't real." Sirius's smile became slightly mischievous. "It is if you're the one doing it." Before the girl could respond, two adults came running up the path, panic written across their faces. A man and woman in professional clothes, clearly just pulled out of their day by the sight of their daughter, surrounded by strange strangers and floating books. The woman grabbed the girl, Hermione, into her arms. "Hermione, oh my God, are you hurt? What happened?" The man stared at Remus and Sirius, protective fear rising. "Who are you?" Remus lifted his hands again. "Not a threat," he said calmly. "My name is Remus Lupin. This is Sirius Black." We're like your daughter," Sirius said quickly, stepping in before Remus could say wizards out loud in a crowded park. Remus gave Sirius a brief look that said, "Good catch." Sirius continued smoothly, lowering his voice. "There are things about her that you don't understand yet. But she's not sick. She's not dangerous. She's gifted." Hermione's mother looked torn between anger and fear. Gifted how? They were drawing attention. People were staring at the cracked ground. at the scattered books. Could we, Remus said gently, continue this conversation somewhere more private? They ended up in a nearby cafe. Hermione sat between her parents, still clutching her book like it could defend her from reality. Her eyes kept flicking toward Harry, then away, as if she couldn't decide whether he was comforting or alarming. Sirius sat across from them, leaning back casually, trying to look like a harmless stranger in a leather jacket. Remus sat beside him, shoulders relaxed, voice careful. Hermione's parents introduced themselves, Mr. and Mrs. Granger. Dentists, Remus noted quietly, because Hermione had mentioned it in a quick burst of anxious explanation. They listened with expressions that shifted from disbelief to horror to confusion as Remus finally said the words plainly. Magic is real, Remus said, and your daughter has it. Mrs. Granger's hands tightened around her coffee cup. That's impossible. Sirius leaned forward, tone gentler. It happens sometimes. Children like Hermione are born to non-magical parents. We call it Muggle-born. Mr. Granger swallowed. Is she in danger? Not from the magic itself, Remus said. But accidental magic can be unpredictable. Strong emotions can make it surge. She'll need guidance. Hermione stared at them, eyes wide. She whispered. I'm not broken. Remus's chest tightened. He kept his voice steady. No. Sirius's eyes softened. You're a witch. Hermione looked like she might faint. But witches are stories, she said. Stories come from somewhere, Sirius replied. Remus pulled a piece of parchment from his pocket, plain, unenchanted, so it didn't look like a trick. When Hermione turns 11, Remus said, she'll receive a letter from Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. It's a school for young witches and wizards. That's where they learn control. That's where they learn how to live in this world. Hermione's eyes locked onto the word school like it was oxygen. 11, she repeated. That's 5 years. And until then, Mrs. Granger said sharply, what do we do? That was the real question. Sirius glanced at Remus. Remus's eyes met his, and Sirius saw the same thought there. Quiet, heavy, inevitable. If they walked away now, Hermione would be alone with something she couldn't name. She would fear herself. She would hide. She would explode again, someday, in a way that might hurt her or someone else. Remus spoke first. We can help, he said. Mr. Granger frowned. You just met her. Remus didn't look away. I know what it is, he said quietly. To be afraid of something inside you that you didn't choose. Sirius's voice was softer. We have a child too, he said, nodding toward Harry. He's younger, but he's magical. They could learn together, at least the basics. Not wand work. She's too young for that. But theory, control, understanding. Mrs. Granger looked at Hermione. Hermione looked back with fierce, desperate hope. Please, Hermione whispered. Her parents exchanged a long glance that carried 1,000 unspoken fears. Then Mrs. Granger's shoulders slumped slightly. All right, she said. But we don't want her taken. We don't want secrets. Remus nodded immediately. You won't lose her. You'll just share her world. Hermione exhaled like she'd been holding her breath for years. Harry, who had been quiet for almost an entire minute, leaned forward and stared at Hermione with blunt curiosity. What's your name? Hermione asked him suddenly. Harry blinked. Harry. Hermione's eyes narrowed. Just Harry? Sirius coughed, not quite hiding a laugh. Harry hesitated, then said, Harry Potter. Hermione froze. Her eyes went enormous. You're, she whispered, voice shaking with awe and confusion. Harry looked alarmed. Did I do something wrong? Hermione looked like her brain had tripped over itself. No. My book. There's a... Sirius leaned in quickly, voice light, trying to keep it from becoming a scene. We'll explain later. The wizarding world is dramatic. Hermione stared at Harry like he was a living chapter heading. Then, very seriously, she asked, "Do you want to be friends?" Harry's face brightened instantly, relief and excitement flashing through him. Yes. Hermione blinked as if she hadn't expected it to be that easy. "I've never had a friend," she said in a small voice. Harry hesitated, then lied with the confidence of a child who doesn't realize the weight of words. "Me neither." Sirius made a mental note to fix that. Remus's eyes softened painfully. Harry grinned and tugged at Sirius's sleeve. "Can I show her my broom?" Hermione's head snapped up. "It flies." Harry nodded fiercely. "Really flies." Hermione's mouth fell open. And just like that, in a cafe filled with ordinary people sipping tea, a new timeline took root. Not in prophecy, not in destiny, in friendship. In the months that followed, the arrangement became a rhythm. At first, Hermione visited Grimmauld Place on weekends. The Grangers remained present, protective, careful, good parents trying to learn the shape of a world they had never believed in. Hermione arrived with a stack of books and questions, sharp enough to cut. Sirius taught her that rules were not sacred. Remus taught her that knowledge mattered because it gave you choices. Harry followed her everywhere, delighted by someone who could match him in stubbornness and outthink him in half the time. At school, Hermione had been mocked for being intense, for being clever, for being too much. At Grimmauld Place, she was celebrated. She was listened to. When she recited facts, Remus didn't tell her to stop talking. He asked, "And what do you think that means?" When she argued, Sirius didn't punish her. He grinned and said, "Good. Never let anyone tell you you're wrong without making them prove it." By the time Hermione was 8, she was spending whole weeks there. By the time she was 10, she had a room of her own on the 3rd floor, painted blue at her request. Lined with shelves, Sirius conjured in a single afternoon while complaining loudly that he was being domesticated against his will. She had 2 families, the Grangers, who gave her life, and the strange, broken, brilliant men who gave her magic. And Harry gave her something she had never had before, unconditional belonging. When Harry was 7, he started calling her his sister. Hermione always did. "I'm not legally your sister." Harry shrugged, unimpressed by legality. "Don't care. You're my sister anyway." Hermione stared at him like he'd given her something huge, and she didn't know how to hold it. Then she hugged him, awkward and fierce. "Okay," she said quietly. "Then you're my brother." Remus watched from the doorway, throat tight, and felt something in him crack and mend at the same time. Sirius stood beside him and whispered, "We have a family, Moony." Remus didn't argue, because it was true. And if the world wanted to call them unnatural, scandalous, dangerous, then the world could choke on it. They had a boy who had survived Voldemort. They had a girl whose power could crack the earth when she was angry. And they were raising them in a house that had once been built for hate. That alone felt like defiance. But defiance wasn't enough. Not when the world was still full of dark corners. Not when Voldemort's shadow hadn't truly vanished, only retreated. So Sirius and Remus began what they jokingly called, in private, the Marauder curriculum. Not because they wanted children to fight, but because they knew what the world did to children who weren't prepared. And because, if war ever came again, they refused to let their kids be helpless. They started with basics: control, focus, intent. They taught Harry and Hermione how to calm themselves before magic spilled out, how to breathe through anger, how to stop fear from becoming fire. They taught theory at the kitchen table with mugs of cocoa and stacks of parchment that Hermione treated like treasure. They taught practical skills in the drawing room, moving furniture out of the way, while Creature muttered angrily about children ruining everything, even as he brought snacks with surprising efficiency. They taught them to notice, to watch, to listen, to question, and slowly, without anyone outside the house realizing it, two children became something else. Not just talented, not just clever, trained. By the spring before Hogwarts letters were due, Harry could summon small objects without a wand if he focused hard enough. Hermione could produce light between her fingers, like a captured star. Ron Weasley didn't even know they existed yet. Draco Malfoy hadn't yet decided who to be. Dumbledore watched from a careful distance, uneasy and impressed in equal measure, because he could feel the shape of what Sirius and Remus were creating: a family and a force. And the world, still lulled by the idea that peace could last forever, had no idea what was coming. Because the children who would step onto platform 9 3/4 in 1991 were not blank slates. They were not innocent. They were loved, sharpened, and ready. September 1st, 1991, arrived like a drumbeat. Not because the world changed in a single morning. Most of it didn't. Muggles still bought newspapers and complained about weather. Wizards still pretended nothing truly terrible could happen at a school protected by ancient stone and Albus Dumbledore's reputation. But for Sirius Black, that date had been circling in his head for years, because it meant Harry was leaving the house. It meant the first time Sirius would not be able to keep his hand on the back of Harry's shoulder, guiding him through every doorway. It meant letting the world touch what Sirius had built. The morning was chaos, in the way all significant mornings are. Harry bounced off walls like a firework. His trunk was packed, unpacked, repacked. His owl, white, proud, offended, kept snapping her beak whenever Sirius leaned in too close. Hermione moved through the kitchen with her list clutched like sacred scripture, checking boxes with an intensity that suggested she might duel anyone who dared disrupt her system. Remus tried to maintain order. He failed immediately. "Harry," Remus said, voice calm but firm, "your robes are in your trunk. Stop trying to put them in your bag. The bag is for things you need on the train." "But what if I need them?" Harry argued, tugging the folded black fabric toward him. "You will not need to change clothes on the train," Remus said. Sirius, rummaging through Harry's trunk for the third time, muttered, "I did once." Remus's gaze cut to him like a blade. Sirius raised his hands. Different circumstances. It was a dare. Hermione's head snapped up. What kind of dare? Sirius smiled innocently. The educational kind. Hermione narrowed her eyes as if filing it away for later investigation. Remus sighed and turned back to Harry. "Wand?" Harry patted his pocket. "Here, books." "In the trunk. Map." Harry hesitated. Sirius held up a folded piece of parchment with a grin. "Already packed. And no, you may not show it to everyone on the train, because then it becomes a security risk. And Dumbledore has words with me." Harry's eyes lit up. "So I can show it to a few people?" "No," Remus said instantly. "A few," Sirius insisted. Remus turned slowly, his expression so flat it could have been carved out of stone. "Sirius." Sirius held up the parchment like a peace offering. "Fine, fine. It stays hidden unless needed." Harry looked personally betrayed. Hermione, watching this familiar dance, leaned in toward Harry and whispered, "He'll crack within 2 weeks." Harry whispered back, delighted, I give it 4 days. Sirius heard them and looked offended. I have discipline. Remus made a thoughtful humming noise. Sirius pointed at him. That was disrespectful. Remus didn't deny it. Then Sirius did the thing that made Harry's throat tighten every time. Even now, he pulled the two-way mirror from his pocket and pressed it into Harry's hand with solemn seriousness that barely contained panic. If you need anything, Sirius said quietly, voice rough, anything at all, you call me. Harry swallowed. I will. Sirius didn't let go of the mirror immediately. His fingers lingered like he was anchoring a part of himself to Harry through the glass. Remus stepped forward with a package wrapped in brown paper. Hermione's eyes widened the moment she saw it. A first edition of Hogwarts: A History, Remus said, trying to sound casual and failing completely. Hermione stared. Remus, It's a book, Remus interrupted gently. Books are meant to be read. Consider it a birthday present early, for making the last 10 years bearable. Hermione's face did something complicated. Pride and gratitude and emotion. She tried desperately to fold into neat boxes like her lists. Then she did the only thing she could do without falling apart. She hugged him hard. Remus froze for half a second, then wrapped his arms around her with careful warmth, like he was holding something precious and fragile and wholly real. Harry joined the hug without hesitation. Sirius refused to be outdone and pulled them both in, arms around shoulders, group hug so tight it bordered on absurd. Creature watched from the doorway, muttering under his breath, disgraceful, while quietly wiping his eyes with the corner of his tea towel when he thought no one was looking. By the time they reached King's Cross, Sirius had checked Harry's trunk so many times, Remus finally shoved him gently backward. They are not going to steal his socks, Remus said. Sirius sniffed. You don't know that. Hermione rolled her eyes. Sirius, they have magic. Exactly, Sirius said, as if this proved his point. Magical sock theft. It's a growing problem. Harry laughed, which made Sirius feel like he could breathe again. Platform 9 3/4 was a river of noise and steam and excited voices. Families clustered, trunks rattling, owls hooting. The scarlet train waited like a living creature, puffing smoke into the high air. Harry and Hermione stood close together, shoulders nearly touching. They were used to being a unit, used to being the kids. Now they were about to become students. Sirius crouched down so he could look Harry in the eye. Listen, he said, voice serious now. You'll have people watching you. Harry nodded. He knew. They'll stare, Sirius continued. They'll whisper. They'll build stories about you that have nothing to do with who you actually are. Don't let it get in your head. Harry's face hardened slightly. I won't. Sirius's gaze softened. And if anyone tries to make you feel small, Harry's mouth twitched. I'll hex them. Remus coughed. Harry amended quickly. I'll consider strategic responses. Remus looked mildly impressed. Hermione stepped forward, practical as always. We'll write, she promised. Every day. Sirius nodded, swallowing something. Use the mirror if there's trouble. Hermione's eyes sharpened. We will. Then the whistle blew. The moment arrived. Harry hugged Sirius first. Tight, quick, fierce. Sirius held him for a second longer than was socially acceptable and didn't care. Then Harry hugged Remus, and Remus squeezed his shoulders in a way that carried 10 years of unspoken love. Hermione hugged Remus too, then Sirius, and Sirius kissed the top of her head like she was his own, because she was, in the ways that mattered. Go, Sirius said, voice rough. Learn things, break rules, make us proud. Not too many rules, Remus added, soft but firm. Definitely break some rules. Sirius corrected. Hermione smirked. We'll break the right rules. Harry leaned out the train window as it began to move. We'll be fine. Sirius forced a grin. You'd better be. Remus stood beside him, hands in pockets, watching until the train disappeared around the bend. Sirius exhaled shakily. Remus said quietly, They'll be fine. Sirius didn't look away from where the train had vanished. Doesn't make it easier. No, Remus agreed. It doesn't. They found a compartment quickly, not because they'd pushed anyone aside, but because Hermione had already calculated the optimal strategy. Walk far enough down the corridor that the early compartments were full. Then choose one near the middle, where fewer people had settled, and claim it before the crowd redistributed. Harry admired her mind, the way some people admired fireworks. They had barely settled when the door slid open and a red-haired boy stood there, looking as if he'd been pushed into a lion's den by fate. He had freckles, a nervous smile, and the posture of someone who'd grown up in a house where the volume was always too loud and affection came disguised as teasing. He said, is this? Can I? Everywhere else is full. Harry nodded. Yeah, sit. The boy's relief was instant. He shoved his trunk in awkwardly and sat opposite them. I'm Ron, he said quickly. Ron Weasley. Harry smiled. Harry. Ron's eyes widened. Hermione sighed, as if bracing herself. Ron blurted, Harry Potter. Harry gave him a look that was half amusement, half resignation. That's what they tell me. Ron stared like he was trying to memorize Harry's face for later proof. Hermione leaned forward, crisp. Try not to gawk. He's a person. Ron flushed. Sorry. Yeah, sorry. It's just, my brothers said. Harry cut in gently. It's fine. Ron's gaze darted to Hermione. And you're? Hermione Granger, she said, chin lifted slightly. Muggle-born. Ron blinked. Really? But you sound like you've been living in the library since birth. Hermione's eyes narrowed. Thank you? Harry grinned. She basically has. Ron laughed, then hesitated. Wait, you two, do you know each other? Harry's face softened. Since I was 5. Ron's eyes widened more. How? Sirius Black and Remus Lupin raised me, Harry said calmly. Ron choked slightly. Sirius Black, the innocent man the Ministry nearly ruined, Hermione said sharply. Ron sputtered. Yeah, my dad said it was the biggest scandal. Harry nodded. He's my godfather. Remus lives with us. Ron stared, mind clearly racing through everything he'd ever heard and trying to fit it into a new shape. Blimey, he finally said. That's mad, Hermione corrected automatically. It's unusual, not mad. Ron lifted his hands. Okay, unusual, brilliantly unusual. Harry's grin widened. And just like that, the first Hogwarts friendship formed, not because of a troll or desperation or shared danger, but because Ron Weasley looked at the two of them and saw something he understood. Family. Even if it was stitched together instead of inherited. They talked for hours about Hogwarts, about houses, about sweets, about Quidditch. Ron described his brothers with equal parts pride and exhaustion. Hermione asked questions like she was conducting an interview. Harry listened, quietly pleased by the way Ron's presence felt easy. By the time the train arrived, Ron was no longer the boy who'd wandered in nervously. He was theirs. The great hall hit like a wave. Hermione had read descriptions, of course, but books didn't capture scale. They didn't capture the way the ceiling looked truly open to the night sky, stars shining above floating candles. They didn't capture the sound. Hundreds of voices layered together, laughter and nerves and excitement. Harry felt the whispers immediately. They weren't loud. They were constant. That's him. That's Harry Potter. That's the boy who lived. He had learned to ignore attention, but Hogwarts had its own kind of hunger, and the myth of him had grown in the years since Voldemort fell. Hermione stepped closer to him instinctively. Harry's shoulder brushed hers. Grounding. McGonagall called names. Kids sat. The hat sang. The hall clapped. Then Hermione's name came. Hermione Granger. Hermione walked forward with her spine straight, face composed, and sat on the stool. The hat dropped over her hair. Silence. Longer than most. Whispers began. A hat stole. Hermione's heart pounded, but she kept still. She had practiced stillness. She had trained herself not to fidget, even when her mind screamed. Inside her head, a voice spoke, ancient and amused. "Well," the hat murmured, "you're interesting." Hermione didn't flinch. She thought, "I'm Hermione Granger." The hat sounded entertained. "Yes, yes, I can see that. A mind like a blade. Ravenclaw would welcome you with open arms." Hermione's stomach tightened. Ravenclaw made sense. She knew it did. Knowledge, curiosity, cleverness. But she thought of the people who had loved her first. Not because she was clever, because she existed. She thought of Sirius building a wall in front of screaming hatred. She thought of Remus giving her books and patience. She thought of Harry's hand reaching for hers when the world felt too sharp. And she made her choice. Not Ravenclaw, she thought firmly. The hat paused. "Oh, Gryffindor," Hermione said. It wasn't about courage as a concept. It was about where she belonged. Family loyalty, the hat mused. Over intellect? That's rare for you. I value both, Hermione thought. But if you're asking what I'd die for, what I'd fight for, then it's them. The hat seemed to chuckle deep in its stitches. "You've been well taught," it said warmly. "Very well, then, Gryffindor." The table erupted. Hermione walked to it, with relief flooding her like warmth. She sat, cheeks slightly pink, and for a moment she looked up at the staff table where McGonagall watched with narrowed eyes, as if assessing, as if recognizing something unusual. Then it was Harry's turn. Harry Potter. The hall changed, like someone had turned a dial. Whispers sharpened. Bodies leaned. 100 pairs of eyes locked on him. Harry walked forward without hesitation. He had been trained for scrutiny. He sat. The hat dropped over his eyes. Inside his head, the voice was immediate, almost pleased. "Ah," the hat said. "There you are." Harry thought, "Hello." The hat hummed. "Difficult, difficult. Plenty of courage. Plenty of nerve. Not a bad mind either. And, oh, that's interesting. Resourcefulness. A certain disregard for rules." Harry thought. Marauder rules. The hat sounded amused. "Indeed, you could do well in Slytherin, you know. Ambition. Cunning. A talent for bending situations." Harry's scar tingled faintly. Not painful, just present. "No," Harry thought firmly. "Gryffindor." The hat paused. "You're sure?" "Like my parents. Like Sirius and Remus." The hat seemed to soften. "Very well," it said. Griffin. The table exploded. Hermione stood up and clapped so hard her hands stung. Harry slid onto the bench beside her, breath releasing, and she leaned in and whispered, "Together." Harry whispered back, "Always." Ron was sorted into Gryffindor, too, looking so relieved he might have cried. He practically dove into the seat across from them. "I'm with you," he said, like he'd just been rescued from drowning. Hermione smirked. "Yes, we noticed." Ron grinned. "Good, because I—" Then Snape's eyes found Harry across the hall, and for half a second the temperature around them seemed to drop. Harry met his gaze evenly. Remus had warned him. Snape had been a Death Eater once. Snape had also changed sides. Snape was brilliant and bitter and complicated, and hated James Potter, for reasons that were not entirely unjust. Harry knew all of that, but knowing it and feeling it were different. Snape looked at him like he was a ghost wearing someone else's skin. Harry didn't look away. The first weeks passed quickly. Classes, corridors, ghosts, homework, the castle unfolding like a living map. Harry and Hermione didn't need the adjustment most first years did. They weren't overwhelmed by moving staircases or enchanted ceilings. They weren't frightened of strict professors. They were curious. They were ready. But Hogwarts tested you anyway, no matter how prepared you thought you were. And it tested them first in the dungeons, potions. Snape swept into the room like a storm dressed in black. His voice dripped contempt as he spoke about bottling fame and brewing glory. His eyes lingered on Harry like a personal insult. Then Snape began calling on him. Potter, Snape drawled. What would I get if I added powdered root of asphodel to an infusion of wormwood? Harry answered without blinking. The draught of living death, sir. A flicker of surprise crossed Snape's face, quickly buried. And where would you look if I asked you to find me a bezoar? In the stomach of a goat, sir. It's an antidote to most poisons. And the difference between monkshood and wolfsbane? Harry felt Hermione tense beside him. He answered anyway, voice clear. They're the same plant, sir, aconite. Extremely poisonous, used in several complex potions, including wolfsbane potion, which allows werewolves to keep their minds during transformation. The room went silent. Hermione's hand was raised so high it looked like her shoulder might dislocate, but she slowly lowered it, staring at Harry with dawning horror, because Harry hadn't just answered. He had revealed something. Snape's face went very still. His eyes sharpened, then narrowed, as if he'd just been handed a weapon. 5 points from Gryffindor, Snape said softly, dangerously, for being an insufferable know-it-all. Harry's jaw tightened. Sir, you asked the question. Do not talk back to me, Snape snapped. Harry shut his mouth, but his hands clenched under the desk. Hermione's face went pale with controlled fury. Snape glided closer, voice low. You are exactly like your father, he murmured. Arrogant, entitled, certain the rules don't apply. Harry looked up at him, eyes steady. I never met my father, Harry said carefully, but I know he was brave, loyal. He died protecting his family. If that's arrogance, then I'd rather be arrogant than a coward. Snape's expression twisted. Detention, Snape hissed. Tomorrow evening, my office. After class, Ron exploded in the corridor. That was completely unfair. You answered his questions. He hates me because I look like my dad, Harry said quietly. Hermione's voice was sharp. That's not an excuse. No, Harry agreed. But it's reality. Ron looked between them, anxious. So what do we do? Harry touched the mirror in his pocket without pulling it out. A comfort. We do what we always do, Harry said. Hermione's eyes narrowed. Learn. Watch. Prepare. Harry nodded. Exactly. Halloween arrived, and with it, the first real moment Hogwarts tried to swallow them. Quirrell burst into the great hall, stuttering about a troll in the dungeons. Dumbledore's voice boomed, sending students toward their dormitories. Harry and Ron reached Gryffindor Tower and realized Hermione wasn't there. Ron went white. She's in the bathroom. At lunch, I said. His voice cracked. I said she was a nightmare. She's been crying all afternoon. Harry's stomach dropped. Hermione, alone. Harry's fingers curled around the mirror in his pocket. The smart thing was to call Sirius, to call adults, to trust the system. But Hermione wasn't a system. She was his sister. And if the troll found her before help arrived, Harry met Ron's eyes. Ron met his. No argument. They ran. The smell hit first, rotting garbage and wet stone. They reached the bathroom, and there it was, 12 feet tall, grey skin, club in its massive hands. Hermione was backed against the sinks, wand trembling, face streaked with tears and terror. Harry's training snapped into place like armor. Assess. Troll. Thick hide. Low intelligence. Resistant to simple spells. Vulnerable to coordination and environment. Advantages. Surprise. Preparation. Teamwork. Ron. Harry shouted. Club. Ron's wand jerked upward. Wingardium Leviosa. The club lifted, wobbled, then swung hard, down onto the troll's skull with a sickening crack. The troll reeled. Harry didn't hesitate. Stupefy. The spell hit like a hammer. Combined with the blow, the troll crumpled, crashing to the floor. Hermione stared, shocked. Then she launched herself at Harry like she could fuse herself to him. You could have died, she whispered fiercely, voice shaking. You? Harry hugged her hard. Of course we came, he said. You're my sister. Ron exhaled shakily, staring at the unconscious troll, like he couldn't believe they'd done it. Professors burst in moments later. McGonagall, Snape, Quirrell. McGonagall looked furious and terrified, like she wanted to scream and hug them at the same time. What were you thinking? She demanded. Harry met her gaze. She was in danger. McGonagall's face tightened. 5 points from Gryffindor each. She snapped. Then, softer, for reckless endangerment. Then she looked at Harry more carefully, eyes narrowing. And Mr. Potter, she added. That was an impressive, stunning spell for a first year. She hesitated, then said, 10 points to Gryffindor each, for courage. After the professors left, Harry pulled the mirror out. Sirius, he whispered. Sirius's face appeared instantly, eyes sharp with worry. Harry, why did a troll get into Hogwarts on Halloween? Harry asked quietly. Sirius's expression went hard. Good question, Sirius said. Stay alert. Harry swallowed. Snape was limping when he arrived. His robes were torn, like something bit him. Sirius's eyes narrowed further. Don't investigate alone. Harry's throat tightened. I promise. Sirius stared at him. Harry, I promise. But even as he said it, Harry's mind was already moving. Because Hogwarts didn't make mistakes like that. Someone had let a troll in, and someone was trying to reach something hidden within the school, something the adults weren't telling them about. And Harry Potter, raised by Sirius Black and Remus Lupin, did not ignore mysteries. He learned them, he solved them, he prepared, and somewhere, behind locked doors on the 3rd floor, something waited. After Halloween, Hogwarts didn't go back to normal. It pretended to. That was the difference. The castle continued to glow with candlelight. The great hall continued to echo with laughter. Professors continued to assign essays and dock points, and act like children nearly dying in bathrooms was an unfortunate but manageable inconvenience. But the air had changed, because once you've seen something break through the surface, once you've watched a troll crash into a school that's supposed to be impenetrable, you can't unsee the cracks. And Harry, Hermione, and Ron had grown up in a house built on the principle that you never ignore cracks. You study them. You ask why they're there. You figure out who put them there. The first clue was the corridor on the 3rd floor. Everyone knew about it in the way everyone knows about something forbidden, through whispers, warnings, and the thrill of rules that existed solely to be tested. First years weren't supposed to go near it. McGonagall had said so on the first night. Her voice had carried the kind of threat that made even the boldest students swallow. But Harry had seen Snape limping. He had seen torn robes. He had heard the faint yelp of something very large behind a door when Filch had tried to force students away. So, on a cold evening in mid-November, he waited until the common room dimmed, until voices softened into yawns, until Hermione's quills slowed and Ron's head drooped. Then he pulled the invisibility cloak from the bottom of his trunk. Hermione's eyes lit up instantly, like someone had shown her a forbidden artifact and asked her not to admire it. Ron stared. "That's my dad's," Harry said quietly, spreading it over his hands. "Inherited. That's proper. Useful," Hermione corrected briskly. "Already standing. We're going." Ron blinked between them. "We? You said you promised Sirius—" "I promised not to investigate alone," Harry said calmly. "I didn't promise not to investigate intelligently." Ron stared. "That's such a serious answer." Harry grinned. "I know." Hermione tucked her hair behind her ears, eyes sharp. "We go under the cloak. We don't touch anything. We observe. If there's danger, we leave." "Agreed?" Ron swallowed and nodded. "Agreed." Harry draped the cloak over all three of them. It was a tight fit. Ron's elbow jabbed Harry's ribs. Hermione hissed a whispered complaint about spatial awareness. Harry suppressed a laugh and stepped forward into the strange hush that came with being invisible, like the world had forgotten you existed. The corridors were colder at night. Torchlight flickered. Portraits muttered in their frames, some pretending to sleep, others whispering gossip to each other in lazy murmurs. They moved quietly, feet careful, breath controlled, and when they reached the third-floor corridor, the air felt different, heavier. Not in the way a place feels haunted, in the way a place feels guarded. Filch's cat prowled nearby, eyes glowing like coins. It paused, sniffed the air, and Harry's heart jumped into his throat. Hermione's hand tightened on his sleeve under the cloak. The cat's head tilted. Then, as if deciding it wasn't worth the effort, it trotted away. They reached the door. It was locked, obviously, but also Harry could feel something behind it, something massive. He leaned close, listening. A low rumble, breathing, 3 breaths overlapping. Ron's hand trembled against Harry's arm. Hermione's eyes were wide and bright, the way they got when she was terrified and fascinated at the same time. Harry swallowed. A 3-headed dog. Not a theory. Not a rumor. A fact. And Sirius's voice echoed in Harry's memory like a warning. If something is guarded like that, it's because someone expects it to be attacked. They backed away slowly, silently, the cloak rustling faintly. Only when they were 2 corridors away did Ron exhale. "What in Merlin's name was that?" Ron whispered, voice shaking. "A Cerberus variant," Hermione breathed, already mentally flipping through books. 3-headed dogs are used to guard treasure. They're resistant to most spells, but they fall asleep to music. Harry finished automatically. Hermione stared. "How do you?" "Remus made me read about magical guardians when I was 7, Harry said, as if that explained everything. Ron looked faint. Right. Normal childhood. They returned to Gryffindor Tower with their minds buzzing. And once something like that is in your head, you can't stop pulling at the thread. Who put it there? What was it guarding? Why in a school? Why now? The answer didn't come all at once. It came the way real answers do, through half-sentences overheard, patterns noticed, dates aligned. On Harry's birthday, Hagrid had mentioned a break-in at Gringotts. An attempted theft stopped at the last second. Hermione found the newspaper clipping in the library archives and dragged it to Harry like it was a holy relic. Vault 713, she said, tapping the line. High security. The article says it was empty by the time the thieves reached it. Ron frowned. So they broke in for nothing. Harry's scar tingled faintly. Never pain, just a reminder of something watching from behind his eyes. Empty because someone took it out first, Harry said quietly. Hermione's eyes widened. Hagrid. Ron blinked. Hagrid. Hagrid went to Gringotts the day we met him, Harry said. He picked something up for Dumbledore. He told me it was top secret, and not to worry about it. Hermione's voice was tight with excitement. So Dumbledore moved something valuable from Gringotts to Hogwarts, then guarded it with a three-headed dog. Ron's eyes went wide. So what is it? A pile of gold? Harry shook his head. Not just gold. Hermione was already flipping through a book. There are only a few artifacts valuable enough to justify that level of protection. Her finger stopped on a page. She went still. Then she whispered, Nicholas Flamel. Ron frowned. Who? Hermione's eyes were shining. He's real. A famous alchemist, the only known creator of the Philosopher's Stone. Harry's stomach dropped. The stone. Hermione nodded, voice trembling with adrenaline. It can turn any metal into gold, and it produces the elixir of life. It makes you immortal. Ron stared. Immortal? Harry felt cold spread through him. Because immortality wasn't just a cool idea. It was Voldemort's obsession. It was why he'd hunted power, why he'd murdered, why he'd made the world bleed. If the stone was at Hogwarts, then someone was trying to steal it. And the question wasn't whether it could happen. It was who. Snape was the obvious suspect. He lurked. He glared. He seemed to hate Harry with a personal, simmering intensity. And Harry had seen his torn robes on Halloween. He tried to get past the dog, Ron insisted one night, voice certain. You saw his leg. Hermione didn't shake her head, but her expression was cautious. Or he tried to stop whoever did. Ron blinked. Stop them. Hermione tapped her quill thoughtfully. Snape is unpleasant, but he's not stupid. And he's not reckless. He wouldn't try to steal something from Dumbledore in the middle of a school year, unless he had a death wish. Harry stared into the fire. So, if not Snape, who? Hermione's voice went quiet. Quirrell. Ron snorted. Quirrell? He stutters when someone sneezes. Exactly, Hermione said. No one suspects him, and he teaches defense against the dark arts. If anyone knows how to get past protections, Harry's scar pulsed, faint and insistent, like a heartbeat that wasn't his. He rubbed his forehead and felt the thin line of the scar under his fingers. Sometimes it felt warm, sometimes it felt cold, sometimes, late at night, it felt like a door. And then, in early June, the door opened. Harry woke in the dark with his heart racing and sweat cold on his skin. Not from a nightmare, from a vision. It didn't feel like imagination. It felt like being dragged through a window in his mind into someone else's reality. He saw a chamber lit with strange silver light. He saw the back of Quirrell's head. He saw a mirror tall and ornate, standing like a doorway to something impossible. He heard a high, cold voice that made his blood run thin. Get the stone, you fool! Harry jerked upright, gasping. Hermione sat up in her bed across the dorm room space, hair wild, eyes instantly alert. What? She whispered. Harry? Harry's hands were shaking. It's tonight, he breathed. He's going after it tonight. Hermione slid out of bed without hesitation, already grabbing her robe. "Who?" she demanded. Harry swallowed hard. "Voldemort. He's at Hogwarts. He's in Quirrell. Like he's possessing him." Hermione went very still, then her eyes sharpened into something fierce and clear. "Mirror," she said immediately. Harry's hand was already diving into his trunk, pulling out the two-way mirror with clumsy urgency. He pressed his thumb to the edge. "Sirius Black," he hissed. The glass shimmered. Sirius's face appeared instantly, eyes bleary with sleep, that turned razor-sharp the moment he saw Harry's expression. "Harry," Sirius said, voice rough. "What's wrong?" Harry didn't waste time. "Voldemort's at Hogwarts," he said. "He's in Quirrell. He's going after the stone tonight." Sirius's face went hard in a way Harry had only seen a few times, like a man switching into war. "I'm coming," Sirius said immediately. Harry's throat tightened. Don't do anything stupid." Sirius's grin was brief and dangerous. "You sound like Remus." Then Sirius vanished. The mirror went blank. Hermione stared at Harry. "He's coming," she said, voice steady. "Good." Harry swallowed. "We just need to hold on until adults arrive. Until safety." But Hermione was already moving, pulling on shoes. "Harry," she said sharply, "if Voldemort gets the stone, people die. If Sirius gets here, and Quirrell has already escaped with it, the war starts in the worst possible way." Harry's jaw tightened. He hated that she was right. "We're 11, he said, half protest, half reality check. Hermione looked at him like he'd forgotten what they were. "We're Marauder trained," she said flatly, "and we're not going alone." Harry nodded once. He grabbed his cloak. Hermione grabbed her wand. They woke Ron. Ron blinked blearily, and sat up so fast his hair stuck up like he'd been electrocuted. "Voldemort?" he croaked. "In the school?" Harry nodded. "Tonight." Ron swallowed, then reached for his wand with shaking hands. "Right," Ron said hoarsely. "Let's go get a Dark Lord then, yeah? Normal Hogwarts stuff." Harry smiled grimly. Normal. They moved fast, invisibility cloak over all three of them, slipping through corridors in the dark. They reached the third-floor corridor. The door was already open. A faint harp melody drifted out. Someone had already put Fluffy to sleep. Harry's stomach clenched. They climbed through quickly, hands gripping the trapdoor edge. Below, darkness yawned. Hermione swallowed. On 3. Ron looked like he might vomit. Harry said, 1, 2, 3. They dropped. The air rushed up. They landed in a tangle of vines. Devil's snare. It tightened around ankles and wrists instantly, pulling, choking. Ron panicked. "It's got me." Hermione's voice snapped, sharp and controlled. "Stop moving." Ron froze, trembling. Harry forced himself to breathe. Hermione raised her wand and cast light without hesitation. Lumos solemn. A burst of bright light flooded the chamber. The vines recoiled like burned hands, loosening their grip enough for them to scramble free. They ran. Through the next door. Flying keys swarmed like metallic insects. Harry's mouth went dry. Then he saw the broom. A proper broom, hanging ready. Dumbledore made this passable, Harry thought, heart pounding. For someone. "Cover me," Harry said. Hermione and Ron raised their wands, deflecting keys that darted at their faces. Harry grabbed the broom and shot upward. His body remembered flight like it was breathing. He cut through the swarm, eyes tracking patterns, the way Sirius had taught him. Don't chase the fastest movement. Chase the intention. One key was different. Bent wing, tired flutter, defensive zigzags. Harry dove. His fingers snapped around it. He landed hard, tossed it to Hermione. Hermione unlocked the door with trembling hands. They rushed into the chess chamber. Life-sized pieces loomed, stone eyes watching. Ron swallowed. Oh no. Harry's mind flashed back to stories Ron had told about his brothers playing chess like war. Ron stepped forward, face changing. Less scared, more focused. This is my thing, Ron said, voice low. Hermione grabbed his sleeve. Ron shook his head. I can do it. Harry met Ron's gaze. In it was determination, fear, loyalty. Ron wasn't trained like them. Not like Sirius and Remus had trained Harry and Hermione. But Ron had something else. A mind that saw moves before they happened. A heart that didn't back away once it chose. Tell us what to do, Harry said. Ron nodded. We're going to be pieces. We have to. Otherwise the board won't let us through. Hermione's face tightened. That's insane. Ron's mouth twitched. Welcome to my life. They stepped onto the board. The pieces shifted, acknowledging them. Ron directed them, like a general, voice crisp, eyes scanning. They moved. The enemy pieces struck. Stone clashed, sparks flying. They advanced, square by square, building toward the center. Harry's heart hammered with every impact. Hermione's breath was fast. Ron's voice stayed steady. Then it happened. The enemy queen moved vicious and perfect, cornering Ron's position. Ron's face went pale, then firm. He looked at Harry. If I move here, Ron said, voice tight, you'll have checkmate. You take the king, and you win. Hermione whispered, Ron. No. Ron shook his head, small and stubborn. It's the only way. Harry felt a surge of respect so sharp it hurt. Ron moved. The queen struck. Ron was knocked off his feet, crashing to the ground unconscious. Hermione made a small, broken sound. Harry swallowed hard, forcing himself not to stop. He moved. He took the king. The chess pieces froze. The door opened. Hermione dropped to her knees by Ron, hands shaking. He's alive, she said, voice fierce as if daring the world to disagree. He's alive. Ron breathed shallowly. Harry knelt, touched Ron's shoulder briefly. We'll get him help. Hermione's eyes locked onto Harry. Go, she said. But Harry, don't die. Harry's mouth twitched. Sirius will kill me if I do. Hermione gave him a tight, trembling smile. Exactly. Harry stood. He ran through the next chamber. A logic puzzle with potions and fire waited, but someone had already solved it. The rum bottle sat empty. A faint smell of smoke lingered. Quirrell had passed. Harry pushed through the final doorway. And there he was. Professor Quirrell stood before a tall mirror, his shoulders hunched, his voice frantic. His turban was gone, and on the back of his head, a face, flat and pale and serpentine, eyes red as fresh blood. Voldemort. Harry's blood went cold and hot at once. Harry Potter, the face hissed, voice like ice sliding over stone. How kind of you to join us. Harry raised his wand with hands that didn't shake. Stupefy. The spell hit Quirrell in the chest. He staggered, then twisted aside, the spell glancing off, absorbed, deflected. Quirrell moved with a grace he never showed in class. Not Quirrell, Harry realized. Him. Voldemort laughed softly. You cannot defeat me, child. I don't have to, Harry said, voice steady, forcing himself to breathe like Remus taught him. I just have to delay you. Delay me? Voldemort's amusement sharpened into cruelty. For what? No one is coming. Harry's scar burned. He didn't respond. Because footsteps thundered behind him, the doorway exploded open with violence. Sirius Black burst into the chamber like a storm. Remus Lupin beside him, eyes bright and furious, wand raised. Sirius's voice was a snarl pulled from the bottom of his soul. "Get away from my godson." Quirrell spun, wand flashing up. Cadavra. Green light erupted. Sirius deflected with a shield charm so hard it cracked the air, then fired back a blasting curse that forced Quirrell to dive. Remus moved like water, spells chaining one into the next, binding, disarming, cutting off escape routes. Harry stepped back, heart pounding, eyes darting to the mirror. That was the point. The mirror was the key. He could feel it. Sirius shouted, "Harry, the mirror!" Harry sprinted to it. He looked into the glass and saw himself, but not alone. Behind him, in the reflection, stood James and Lily. Not ghosts, not exactly, but the shape of what he wanted most, the deepest desire he held. Family together, alive, smiling. His reflection reached into its pocket and pulled out a blood-red stone, the Philosopher's Stone. It winked, then it slid it back into its pocket. Harry felt weight in his real pocket, a heavy, cold lump. The stone. Harry's breath caught. "I have it," he shouted. Sirius's voice roared over spellfire. "Then run." Harry ran. Quirrell lunged, hand outstretched. He grabbed Harry's arm and screamed. His skin blistered where it touched Harry. The smell of burning flesh filled the chamber. Voldemort's face shrieked in fury. "What is this?" Harry yanked free, pain shooting through his arm, but relief flooding him like fire. "My mother's protection," Harry gasped. "She died to save me. You can't touch someone protected by that kind of love." Quirrell collapsed, shaking, skin ruined. Voldemort's face twisted. Then smoke erupted, black, formless, terrible, pouring out of Quirrell's body and slamming into the wall like a shadow trying to escape. The wraith vanished through stone, gone. Not dead, but driven out. Sirius stumbled forward, breathing hard, eyes wild. Remus grabbed Harry's shoulders, checking him rapidly like he was an injured soldier. "You're hurt," Remus said, voice tight. "I'm fine," Harry lied immediately. Sirius hauled him into a crushing hug so hard Harry's ribs protested. "You absolute idiot," Sirius whispered harshly into his hair. "You brilliant, terrifying idiot." Harry's voice was muffled. "You came." "Of course I came," Sirius hissed. "Do you think I'd ever not come?" Harry's throat tightened so badly he couldn't answer. Dumbledore arrived moments later, like he had been watching the entire board and had finally decided to step in. His eyes flicked to Quirrell's ruined body, to the empty space where Voldemort's presence had been, to Harry's face, to Sirius and Remus standing like two furious shields. He exhaled slowly. "You called for help," Dumbledore said to Harry, and there was approval in his voice. "That was wise. Sirius taught me, when you're outmatched, you get back up." Dumbledore's mouth twitched. "Your father would be proud." Sirius snorted, still holding Harry. Both of them would. Dumbledore's gaze lingered on Sirius for a fraction too long, as if re-evaluating the shape of the future. Then he looked back at Harry. "What you saw tonight," Dumbledore said quietly, "will not be the last time Voldemort tries to reach through you." Harry's scar throbbed faintly. Harry nodded, jaw tight. "I know." Dumbledore's voice softened. "And Harry, this was brave, but bravery without wisdom becomes tragedy." Sirius bristled. He did what he had to. Remus cut in quietly but firmly. "He did, and we're grateful. But he also nearly died." Harry opened his mouth. Sirius's grip tightened. "Promise me," Sirius said, voice low. Promise me you won't do something like this again without telling us first. Harry's throat tightened. He looked at Sirius's face, older now, harder around the eyes, but still serious. He looked at Remus, pale with fear he tried to hide. He thought of Hermione kneeling beside Ron, refusing to let him die. He thought of the mirror of Lily and James in the reflection, smiling like they were proud. I promise, Harry said softly. Sirius held his gaze. Trying isn't good enough. Harry swallowed. I promise. Remus exhaled shakily. Dumbledore watched them for a moment, like a man witnessing a kind of power he could respect and fear at the same time. Then he said, quietly, the stone will be removed. Quirrell is finished, and Voldemort has been pushed back. Harry's scar cooled slightly. Sirius brushed Harry's hair back, eyes fierce. We won this round, he said. Harry nodded, exhausted. But as he lay in the hospital wing later, while Madame Pomfrey tutted and pressed potions into him, Harry stared at the ceiling and felt the truth settle into him like stone. Voldemort wasn't gone. He was waiting. And the war that would come next would not be the war of the original timeline, because this time, Harry Potter wasn't alone. This time, the people who loved him showed up, and Voldemort had just learned what that meant. Second year began with a strange kind of confidence, not arrogance. Harry had learned what arrogance cost, not carelessness. Hermione would have murdered carelessness in its sleep, but confidence in the fact that they could survive. They had faced a troll. They had stood in the presence of Voldemort. They had watched Sirius and Remus fight like the war never ended. And they had understood in their bones that if the world got darker again, they would not be children stumbling in the dark. They would be a unit. They would be prepared. And Hogwarts seemed to sense it, like a living castle testing its newest inhabitants. Because the very first week of term, something tried to drag them back into fear. It started with a whisper of ink on stone, a message smeared across a corridor wall in letters so large they looked like wounds. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. Underneath it, Filch's cat hung petrified, stiff as carved wood, eyes wide and glassy. The hallway froze. Students clustered, whispering, then backing away as if the words might leap off the wall and bite them. Harry felt the hum of panic rise like heat. Hermione's hand closed around his sleeve instinctively. Ron stared at the cat with an expression that was half horror, half confusion. It's not dead, he whispered. It's like it's been petrified, Hermione finished, already pulling her mind into motion. Full body magical paralysis. It's rare, and it means... She looked up at the message, eyes scanning it like she could pull the truth out by force. The Chamber of Secrets, she breathed. It's real. They didn't wait for the rumor mill. They didn't wait for the story to grow teeth. That night, Hermione had books stacked around her like a fortress. Ron hovered uncertainly, flipping through pages as if afraid the words would jump at him. Harry watched, jaw tight, fingers unconsciously rubbing his scar. What do you know? Harry asked. Hermione didn't look up. Salazar Slytherin, she said rapidly. One of the founders. The legend says he built a secret chamber inside the castle. He hid a monster there, a monster meant to purge the school of Muggle-borns. The chamber can only be opened by the heir of Slytherin. Ron swallowed. So someone's opened it now. Hermione nodded, eyes sharp. And someone is using whatever is inside to attack people. Harry's scar tingled faintly. Not pain. Not yet. Just awareness. He hated that feeling, the sense of being connected to something he didn't choose. He looked away and forced his voice steady. So we figure out what the monster is. Ron made a weak noise. How exactly do we do that? Hermione's lips thinned. Research. Ron sighed. Of course. They were still in that rhythm. Hermione reading, Harry thinking, Ron reacting. When it happened. The voice, not in the room, not in the air, in the walls. A hiss sliding through stone like water. Rip, tear, kill. Harry went still. His stomach dropped. Hermione looked up instantly, eyes narrowing at Harry's face. What? Ron frowned. You look like you just swallowed a frog. Harry swallowed hard. Did you hear that? Hermione blinked. Hear what? Mate. I didn't hear anything except Hermione's pages turning like a threat. The voice came again, faint but clear to Harry like it was right beside his ear. Let me kill. Harry's scar warmed. Hermione's gaze sharpened. Harry. Then he did what Sirius and Remus had drilled into him since he was small. You don't keep secrets that could get you killed. There's a voice, Harry said quietly. In the walls. It's hissing. Like a snake. Ron's eyes widened. That's creepy. Hermione's face went very still. Her voice lowered. What is it saying? Harry swallowed again, throat tight. It's talking about killing. Hermione's hand tightened on her book. Harry, only you can hear it. Harry nodded. Hermione's mind clicked into place with frightening speed. Harry, can you understand it? Harry blinked. Yes, it's English. Hermione's eyes widened, and Ron's face went pale. It's not English, Hermione whispered, voice almost reverent with fear. It's Parseltongue. Ron made a strangled noise. That's the snake language, right? Hermione nodded slowly, gaze locked on Harry. Only Parselmouths can understand it. It's extremely rare. Harry's stomach twisted. Voldemort was a Parselmouth, and Voldemort had tried to kill him. Harry's voice came out rough. So, when Voldemort marked me, something transferred. Ron stared at him like Harry had just told him he was secretly a dragon. Harry, that's... People are going to think... Hermione cut in sharply. No one needs to know yet. Harry met her eyes gratefully. Hermione's voice softened slightly. But it means something. The chamber is opened by Parseltongue. If you can understand the voice, then you might be able to find where it's coming from. Harry's scar throbbed faintly. He hated that his usefulness was tied to Voldemort. But he hated more the idea of someone being hurt while he did nothing. He pulled out the two-way mirror that night and called Sirius. Sirius's face appeared, instantly alert. Harry. Harry didn't waste time. There's a voice in the walls, he said. It's speaking a snake language. Hermione says it's Parseltongue, and I can understand it. Sirius went very still, his eyes sharpened. Can you speak it? Sirius asked quietly. Harry hesitated, then tried to mimic the sound in his mind. He heard himself hiss, the syllables sliding out wrong and right at the same time. Open, Harry said in Parseltongue, and even through the mirror Sirius flinched. Merlin, Sirius breathed. You are a Parselmouth. Remus's voice came from off-screen, suddenly close. What? Sirius turned the mirror slightly, and Remus appeared too, eyes intense. Harry explained quickly. Remus listened with that same careful calm he used when he was terrified. When Harry finished, Remus said softly, This changes things. Sirius's jaw tightened. It means the chamber might respond to you. I don't want it to. Sirius's expression softened. I know. But you're not Voldemort, Harry. You're not defined by what he did to you. You're defined by what you choose. Remus nodded. And you choose to protect people. Harry swallowed. So what do we do? Sirius's eyes went hard. We don't let this escalate. You tell Dumbledore tomorrow. We push the adults to act now. Harry hesitated. Part of him wanted to solve it himself, the Marauder-trained part. But another part of him remembered the promise he'd made after the stone. Promise me you won't do something like this again without telling us first. Harry nodded. Okay. The next day, Dumbledore listened in silence as Harry explained. The headmaster's eyes sharpened at the mention of Parseltongue. Not fear, not suspicion, calculation. A rare gift, Dumbledore said gently. Or perhaps a rare consequence. Harry clenched his jaw. Does it mean I'm the heir? Dumbledore's gaze softened. No, Harry. It means Voldemort left more than a scar behind. It means you carry traces of him, but you are not him. Hermione stood beside Harry, spine straight, eyes fierce. Someone is controlling the monster. Someone opened the chamber. Dumbledore nodded slowly. Indeed. Sirius and Remus were at Hogwarts within the hour, not storming in like last year, walking in like they belonged, because after last year, Dumbledore had learned something. When the Marauders moved, things happened quickly. They met in Dumbledore's office. Sirius paced like a caged animal. Remus sat, hands folded, mind already mapping the possibilities. Hermione stood near the window, staring out at the grounds like she could see the chamber hidden beneath them. Ron hovered near the door, trying to look brave. Dumbledore spoke calmly. If the monster is petrifying victims, not killing them, then its method suggests indirect contact, a reflection perhaps, or something that affects the eyes. Hermione's eyes snapped up. A basilisk. The room went still. Sirius stopped pacing. Remus's gaze sharpened. Hermione. Hermione's voice was steady, even as her hands trembled slightly. A basilisk kills with direct eye contact, but if a victim sees it through a mirror, a puddle, a camera lens, they would be petrified instead of killed. Dumbledore nodded slowly, impressed. A logical conclusion. Ron looked horrified. So there's a giant snake moving through the pipes, Hermione finished, voice tight. That's why the attacks happen in corridors. That's why there's no sound. It could travel unseen. Harry's scar pulsed faintly, and then he remembered the voice in the walls. He swallowed. It says it's hungry. Sirius's jaw clenched. Then we stop it. Remus's voice was calm, but edged. Not by sending children into the pipes. Harry's cheeks flushed. We weren't going to. Sirius cut in sharply. No, you weren't. Not this time. Harry fell silent, frustration burning. Hermione's eyes flicked to him. She understood that feeling, the urge to act. But she also understood what it meant to lose people. Dumbledore steepled his fingers. If it is a basilisk, then we require a method of locating it. Harry's Parseltongue may provide access to the chamber, but it does not tell us who opened it or why. Hermione's eyes narrowed. The heir. Someone who can speak Parseltongue. Ron's face went pale. There can't be that many people who can do that. Sirius's voice went low. Unless they're not speaking it naturally. Remus's gaze sharpened. Possession. The word hung. Harry felt cold, because he knew what possession felt like. Voldemort's presence behind his eyes in that dream last year. Hermione's voice went quiet. The attacks, the writing, the targeting of Muggle-borns. It feels like someone reenacting history. Dumbledore nodded. 50 years ago, a student died. Myrtle Warren. The chamber was opened. The culprit was blamed. Hagrid, Ron whispered. Harry's jaw tightened. Hagrid had been kind to him, had carried him, had cried when he thought he'd failed. Hermione's voice was sharp with certainty. Hagrid didn't do it. Sirius glanced at her. How do you know? Hermione's eyes burned. Because Hagrid isn't the kind of person who hurts children. Sirius's expression softened slightly. Good answer. The investigation shifted, not into whispered speculation among children, into a coordinated, adult-backed hunt. Dumbledore brought in professors quietly. McGonagall, Flitwick, Sprout, even Snape, who arrived with a scowl sharp enough to cut stone. Snape's eyes flicked to Sirius and Remus with open hostility, then to Harry with that same personal bitterness. Sirius stared back like he'd happily duel Snape on the spot. Remus placed a hand on Sirius's arm, grounding him. Snape spoke first, voice cold. If Potter is hearing voices, perhaps the school should consider whether he is the source. Harry's jaw clenched. Hermione bristled instantly. That's ridiculous. Snape's lip curled. Is it? A Parselmouth speaking to snakes? With a connection to the Dark Lord, Sirius stepped forward, wand half raised. Say one more word about my godson, and I'll show you what a real dark wizard looks like, Snape. Dumbledore's voice cut through the tension. Enough. Snape's eyes glittered, but he shut his mouth. Remus's voice was quieter, more dangerous because it didn't need volume. Harry told us because he trusts us. If you punish him for that, you ensure he never warns anyone again. And then people die. That silenced even Snape for a moment. The attacks continued anyway. Because the monster didn't care about meetings, it cared about hunger. It cared about orders. Colin Creevey was found petrified. His camera melted slightly. Film ruined. Justin Finch Fletchley went down in the corridor, eyes wide. Nearly headless Nick was hit too, his ghostly form frozen mid-drift, like even death wasn't safe. The school tightened like a fist. Students whispered about the air of Slytherin, about blood purity, about whether Muggle-borns should go home. The old prejudice rose like rot, and Harry felt it, the way eyes slid toward him when people thought he wasn't looking. The way Slytherins watched him with a hungry, calculating curiosity. The way even some Gryffindors whispered when they thought the famous boy wasn't listening. Hermione noticed. She got angrier than Harry did. Let them stare, she snarled one night in the common room, quill stabbing parchment. Let them whisper. If they think you're the heir because you can speak to snakes, they're idiots, and idiots don't get to decide your worth. Harry smiled faintly. You're terrifying when you're loyal. Hermione's chin lifted. Good. Then, because Hogwarts always waited until fear was ripe, Hermione was attacked. It happened late in February. Harry and Ron found her near the library, stiff as stone, her eyes open but unseeing. In her hand was a torn page from a book and a small black diary. Harry's throat tightened. Ron made a broken noise. Hermione. Harry's fingers trembled as he took the page from her hand. Hermione's handwriting was on it, one word scrawled hard enough to tear parchment. Peeps. Harry's stomach dropped, because Hermione hadn't just been attacked. She had left them a clue. And then Harry's eyes fell to the diary. It looked ordinary, small, worn, blank, but Harry's scar burned the moment he touched it. Like the diary was a living thing, like it recognized him. Ron stared. What is that? Harry swallowed. I don't know. But he did. Not fully, not in words. In instinct, this felt like Voldemort. He opened it. The pages were blank. Harry picked up a quill and wrote, "Hello." The ink sank in. Then words formed slowly, as if written by an invisible hand. "Hello, Harry Potter. My name is Tom Riddle. Harry's blood went cold. Ron leaned in, eyes wide. "Tom Riddle," he whispered. "This is him. Not Voldemort now. Voldemort then. The boy he used to be. The ghost of his own beginning." Ron looked sick. "So what do we do?" Harry's hand tightened on the diary. Last year, he'd faced Voldemort in a room beneath the school. This year, Voldemort was in his hands. In ink. In paper. In something that felt like a trap. Harry didn't hesitate. He pulled out the mirror. "Sirius," he whispered. The glass shimmered. Sirius's face appeared, instantly sharp. "Harry, Hermione's been petrified," Harry said, voice tight. "She left us a clue. Pipes. And there's a diary." It wrote back. "It says it's Tom Riddle. And my scar." Sirius's expression went murderous. Remus appeared beside him, already moving as if he could step through the mirror by will alone. "Do not touch it again," Remus said sharply. Harry froze. "What is it?" Remus's voice was low. "I don't know, but it's dark, and it's targeting you for a reason." Sirius's jaw clenched. "Bring it to Dumbledore. Now." Harry swallowed. "Ginny Weasley. She's been acting strange for months. Tired. Pale. Like she hasn't slept. Ron." Ron's face went white. "Ginny." Harry's throat tightened. "I think it's her. I think that diary." As if summoned by the words, a scream echoed through the castle. A real scream. A student sprinted around the corner, sobbing, shouting, "Ginny Weasley's gone!" Harry's blood went icy. Ron staggered. "No." The corridor wall flashed. Words formed, wet and red. "Her skeleton will lie in the chamber, forever." Harry didn't think. He moved. But this time he didn't move alone. He grabbed Ron's arm. "Hard. Mirror," he snapped. Ron fumbled in his pocket, hands shaking, and yanked out his own mirror. The one Sirius had insisted Ron carry after the stone incident. "Because you're in this now, Weasley." Ron pressed it with trembling fingers. "Sirius!" Ron shouted, voice cracking. "They took Ginny." Sirius's face was already furious. "Stay where you are. We're coming." Harry turned to the diary, scar burning like a warning. Hermione's clue, pipes, Parseltongue. He knew where to go. Moaning Myrtle's bathroom, the sink with the tiny serpent. Harry ran, Ron sprinting beside him, tears streaking his face. They reached the bathroom. The air was cold and damp. Myrtle wailed faintly from a toilet. Harry shoved the diary into his robe pocket without looking, then dropped to his knees by the sink, fingers tracing the tiny carved snake. "Open," he hissed in Parseltongue. The sink trembled. Then it slid aside. A dark hole yawned beneath. Ron stared down, face ashen. "That's it." Harry's heart hammered. He turned to Ron. "We wait for Dumbledore." Ron shook his head violently. "My sister is down there." Harry's throat tightened. He looked at the mirror. Sirius and Remus would arrive fast. Dumbledore would arrive fast. But time down there meant life. Harry made the choice Sirius always taught him to make. If you can't stop the danger, you shorten the window. "We go down," Harry said. "But we don't go blind. We go smart." Ron swallowed, nodding desperately. Harry pulled the cloak out, draped it over them both. Then they climbed into the pipe. They slid, stone and slime and darkness. They landed hard in a tunnel that stank of damp and rot. Harry's scar burned like a brand. Ron's breathing was ragged. They ran, because in the distance, they could hear something else. Not the basilisk. A voice. A boy's voice. Smooth, cold, familiar in a way that made Harry's skin crawl. "Come now," the voice echoed. You're nearly finished, Ginny. Just a bit more, and I'll be whole. Harry's stomach twisted. Tom Riddle, down here, real. And Ginny's life pouring into ink and paper. Harry and Ron burst into the Chamber of Secrets. It was vast, green-lit, lined with towering serpent statues. At the far end, the massive stone face of Salazar Slytherin loomed like a threat frozen in time. Ginny lay pale and limp at the base of the statue, and beside her stood a boy, 16 years old, tall, handsome in a sharp, cruel way. Tom Riddle turned slowly, smiling. Harry Potter, he said, voice smooth, and Ronald Weasley. How convenient. Ron raised his wand, shaking. Let her go, Riddle laughed softly. She's almost gone. She's been giving me herself for months, her secrets, her fears, her life. And in return, he looked at Harry with hungry interest. I get to come back. Harry's scar pulsed. You're Voldemort, Harry said flatly. Riddle's smile widened. Very good. I am Lord Voldemort, or rather the memory of him, preserved, anchored, immortal. Harry's stomach dropped. Anchored, immortal. Sirius's and Remus's years of war training clicked into place. This wasn't just possession. This was something darker, something designed. Riddle's eyes flicked to the diary in Harry's pocket. You brought it, he said softly, pleased. Excellent. Harry's grip tightened on his wand. You're not getting her. Riddle's expression sharpened. He hissed a command in Parseltongue. The statue's mouth opened. Something enormous slid out. Scales scraping stone. A heavy, wet sound. A body so big it made the floor tremble. The basilisk. Its eyes glowed poison green. Ron made a strangled noise. Harry's instinct screamed, Don't look. He clamped his eyes shut instantly. He shouted, Ron, close your eyes. Ron obeyed blindly. Riddle's laughter echoed. How clever, but fighting blind is hopeless. The basilisk lunged. Air moved. Stone shattered. Harry ducked, rolling, using sound and vibration to track its movement. He had trained like this. Sirius had forced him to duel blindfolded as a child for fun. Remus had insisted on it for survival. But this was different. This was death wrapped in scales. A scream pierced the chamber. Not Ginny, a phoenix cry. Fawkes, and with it, footsteps, fast, heavy, furious. A voice that hit Harry like safety. Harry, Sirius, and Remus burst into the chamber like a storm breaking. Their spells lit the green gloom. Remus's voice was sharp. Eyes closed. Sirius's roar was pure rage. You little Riddle. Riddle's laugh sharpened. Ah, the Marauders. How nostalgic. Fawkes dove at the basilisk, talons slashing. The basilisk screamed. Its eyes, its killing eyes, were attacked. Blindness. A window. Harry opened his eyes just enough to see shapes, not gaze. Fawkes clawed at the basilisk's face, distracting it, forcing it back. Something dropped in front of Harry with a metallic clang. A sword, silver, ruby-studded. The sword of Gryffindor. Harry's breath caught. Remus's voice snapped. Urgent. Harry, now. Harry grabbed the sword. The basilisk lunged, blind but furious, guided by sound and heat. Harry rolled aside, then drove the blade upward as the serpent surged. Steel met flesh. The sword pierced the roof of the basilisk's mouth and drove deep. The basilisk convulsed. Its tail slammed the floor, cracking stone. Then it collapsed with a sound like a mountain dying. Harry staggered back, breathing hard. Pain exploded in his arm. A fang had snapped free and sunk into him. Venom, Riddle laughed, delighted. Brave, impressive, and completely pointless. Basilisk venom kills in minutes. Harry's vision blurred slightly. His heart hammered. He forced himself to focus. If he died now, Ginny died too. If he died now, Sirius and Remus would be left with another body in their arms. No, not like this. Harry turned towards the diary that had started it. His scar burned. His arm burned. But his mind was clear. He grabbed the basilisk fang embedded in his arm, teeth gritted against pain, and yanked it free. Then he stumbled toward the diary. Riddle's face changed. For the first time, fear. No, Riddle hissed. No, stop. Harry raised the fang and drove it through the diary. Ink erupted like blood. A scream ripped through the chamber. Inhuman, tearing, a soul being ripped apart. Riddle staggered, form flickering. "You don't understand," Riddle shrieked, voice warping. "He'll come back. He'll be stronger." Harry's eyes burned with tears from pain and fury. "Not if we rip him apart piece by piece," Harry rasped. Riddle's form fractured, then shattered into smoke and nothing. The diary fell limp, pages ruined, dark magic broken. Harry's knees buckled. The venom surged through him like fire. His vision tunneled. He heard Sirius shout his name like it was a spell. He felt hands grab him. Strong, desperate. Remus's voice, rough with fear. "Fawkes!" Warm tears fell onto Harry's wound. Phoenix tears. The pain receded like a tide pulling back. Harry gasped, sucking in air, heart slamming. Ginny stirred weakly, eyelids fluttering. Ron crawled to her, sobbing openly, gathering her in his arms. "Gin," he whispered brokenly. "Ginny." Ginny blinked slowly, confused. "Ron." Ron made a sound halfway between laughter and crying. "You're okay. You're okay." Sirius held Harry like he was afraid to let go. "You absolute," Sirius choked, voice breaking. "You absolute idiot." Harry's mouth twitched weakly. "Hi." Sirius's laugh was broken. "Hi, hi." Remus crouched beside them, hands shaking slightly as he checked Harry's pulse, his breathing, his eyes. Remus's voice was fierce with relief. "You did it." Harry swallowed, exhausted. "Hermione." Remus's face tightened. "She'll recover." Mandrake draft. "She left you the clue that saved Ginny's life. She'll want to know that." Harry's eyes stung. Sirius pressed his forehead to Harry's hair briefly, a gesture so raw it hurt to see. "I'm proud of you," he whispered. Then, immediately, "And I'm also furious." Harry managed a faint smile. "Fair." Dumbledore arrived moments later, his expression grim when he took in the dead basilisk, the destroyed diary, Ginny in Ron's arms, the Marauders standing like protective towers. His gaze fell on the diary's remains, then to Harry, and something in Dumbledore's eyes changed. Not surprise, recognition. Because now he understood what Harry had just destroyed. Not a cursed object. Not a possessed book. Something far darker. Something that explained why Voldemort hadn't truly died. Dumbledore's voice was quiet. "Harry, may I?" Harry nodded weakly. Dumbledore lifted the ruined diary with careful fingers, eyes narrowing, expression tightening, like a man seeing the shape of a nightmare. Then Dumbledore exhaled slowly and said the word that would reframe everything. "Horcrux." Sirius stiffened. "What?" "Albus, what did you just say?" Dumbledore looked up at them, face grave. "A Horcrux," he repeated. "One of the darkest magical artifacts in existence. Created by murder. Used to anchor a piece of the Creator's soul to the physical world." Harry's blood chilled despite exhaustion. Remus went very still. Sirius's expression turned lethal. Dumbledore's voice lowered. As long as a Horcrux exists, Voldemort cannot truly die. The Chamber of Secrets was closed. Ginny was alive. The basilisk was dead. But the war had just revealed its real shape. Because Voldemort hadn't been trying to come back. He had already ensured he could. And now Harry Potter, raised by Sirius Black and Remus Lupin, had torn away a piece of that immortality with his bare hands, which meant Voldemort's return, whenever it came, would not be a mystery. It would be a countdown. And the people in that chamber, standing over the remains of a destroyed Horcrux, understood the same terrible truth at the same time. This wasn't over. It was beginning.